Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to a stat special for Stat Me Up. Fullbacks, ladies and gents, an important position, big consideration for the Reds this summer. Left back, well, that's a priority position, isn't it? Upgrades on Costas, upgrades on Robbo, maybe both go. You may see it different ways. At right back, we don't have a choice. Whatever your hopes are for him staying, forget it. We know what's happening. It's now about who comes in. Is Connor Bradley good enough to be number one? Those targets and all points are going to be discussed tonight. And as ever, I've got Bart to guide me through the fullback situation. And I know I'm throwing you a load of gum when I ask this question, Bart, but the fullback situation, people will always say, and we've talked about it before, a position that doesn't necessarily move the needle. It's not the sexiest position, but Liverpool have got to get these two right this summer. Fullbacks in our team are so important, aren't they, for what we use them for, how we use them as well. We've got to get these recruitment aspects spot on, haven't we?
100%. Probably last 10 years, I would say, the fullbacks have been for Liverpool really important. Very early clock dates, it was high and wide, up and down, and then trying to develop. Even he still stayed wide. It's only recently that he's done a bit of the inverting stuff, and we've had a bit of a lopsided approach. But they're both absolutely key in the way we attack. Defensively as well, they have to be solid, but it's more for us to change the way we attack fundamentally would be a move away from using the fullbacks to do that. And to be fair, the modern systems are now centered around utilising your fullbacks either high and wide like we do, or like Pep does, which is put them into midfield and then he pushes on the midfielders to create an overload higher up. So a bit like Arteta used to do with his early Arsenal team. He doesn't really do that much now, but they're fundamental to the way a modern, I would say, elite side play. So we have to get them right. And as much as they might not move the dial, they do reduce the element of risk of conceding, which I think you can probably see, unfortunately, for one of the legends of, I would say, a legend of the current league is declining. And now when he comes on, we do look a bit unstable. So you need to change that up. With a more stable fullback to come in, and the right side, as you said, there's no hiding about it. We need to decide if what we've got is good enough or whether we go and recruit. So two key positions for maybe not move the needle, but would stop us from losing. Maybe look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's importance to both of these, no doubts at all. And when we start this, it's probably best we'll go left to right. So we'll talk about the left back position. And it's funny this, as I say it, Bart, because I keep seeing this. I know you'll have clocked it repeatedly. Everyone knows Andy Robbo, as you said, legend, 8 million bargain, all the rest. Absolutely brilliant in his pomp, world class. There's zero doubts about all of that. Clearly on the decline. Everyone's seen it this season. You know what? Even the biggest fans of Robbo know this. The conventional wisdom seems to be, and I keep seeing this, and I really don't agree with it, that Tsimikas goes this summer and Robbo stays to see out his final year and then goes on a free, because you keep him around for his leadership and, his personality. And whilst I'm not saying there's, that's just a complete nonsense argument, I understand the principles behind that argument. We've got to look at it in the metrics. And every show I do with you is Stat Me Up. Whenever we look at it, it always comes back to Robbo's on the pitch more, but when Costas is, he does better, tends to be the stat. So when we're basing it on this, it feels like it's not been a stellar season for either. That's important to say. But what do the stats say about these left backs for this season in just straightforward analysis?
I think that statement you made it is largely been true. I would say since turn of year, if I'm being honest with you, I think Costas has been the better fullback since the turn of year. Whether you think that player is good enough to be a Premier League winning left back is a different question. But out of the two, I think Costas has been the better fullback for a period of time now. The problem Costas has got is he has to play to get in rhythm. So then he's not a come in and out type sub, which would be a perfect squad player. Just comes in, does his job, and goes home type thing. He's not that kind of player. So I mean, we haven't updated. This is their weekend game, so apologies. But Robertson, because he's played more, has got more touches than Costas, right? He's got more penalty box touches, but it's a percentage of games played, so out of 1,131 touches from Costas, he's got 23 in the box, whereas Robbo's got over 1,200 more touches, but he's only at 59. So it's not the Costas is doing more with the touches he's got. Pro rata, shots. Robbo's got 15 to that amount on the pitch, whereas Costas probably just under half has got 7 shots, right? That's not Costas' strong point. Dang it, he saw it the weekend. He had a pretty decent chance. I mean, he got a shot off, but anybody else, you probably would have backed into a better effort. And they're fairly similar in terms of that kind of output, should we say. XG, again, some of it is about opportunity, and Robertson until the weekend it would have changed. Robert's at 1.5 XG for the season. That's how much he's actually had a shot, not what he's created. And Costas, because he's not normally on this stuff, has only got 0.3. Okay, EPV 0.6 for Costas and about 10 for Robbo. Again, look at pro rata. That's a little bit the other way, should we say? If we look at some actual player performance. So Robbo here has a dual success for the season of about 34, aerial about 30, which is some of the key things. And this is the key things. The percentage of team EPV is about 10, whereas Costas is about 6. So again, that pro rata in terms of the minutes played is important to note. Costas 52% dual rate, aerials 34 above Robbo. Pass success 89 versus 87, so Costas slightly in advantage, but nothing to write home about, should we say. In terms of the rest of that isn't. Let's have a look at EPV. What do we do in terms of defending at the mobile in there? But if you start looking at then some of your baseline stats in terms of what does it look like in your public domain stuff, right? So this is right up to date for Costas, and you'll see here this is his scouting report for up to the last year's worth of data. Okay, and you'll see when we talk about defensive stuff on this show, the interceptions is what we want to see. That's the proactiveness. Blocks we want to be a little bit better. That's the stopping crosses in Costas is mind. Tackles is probably a little bit higher because we don't really want our fullbacks to be doing that. But if he has to do it, then fine. In between the boxes for Costas, you can see passes attempted 95th, good, green, 95th percentile. Completion 84%, 84th percentile, good. Progressive passes 99th percentile for a fullback. That's really good. That's really good. But this is where the difference comes. He's not a carrier, right? Progressive carry is 27th percentile. Touches in the penalty box. He's not going to do that for you. He did it the weekend because we had to. We were trying to get in there, but he's not that kind of guy, right? He's not going to receive it high. But when he is up there, assists 80th percentile for a fullback. That's good. That's all right. That's better than 8 of every 10 players is better. So expected assists, expected goals 96, shot creating actions 90th percentile. Right. So these are good stuff for Costas. If you start breaking it down a little bit more deeper, you've got his standard stats there. But his passing range here for Costas, as you'll see, is nearly all in the 90th. Apart from long passes, isn't really a strong point for him, right? Pass types. So we've got dead ball he's good at. From free kicks, we know he's on that a lot more when he's on the pitch. Through balls isn't really his game. Cross is 90th percentile in terms of accuracy for that. So there are some good things there. Goal creating action. Again, a lot of green here. 90th for shot creating actions. Fouls drawn, so he draws a foul quite well. Drawing a defensive action, so 91st and 92nd percentile. So they're good actions to be having on that. Defensively, tackles we've already said is high. He also wins a high amount of tackles. He tackles in the middle third is high for him and the defensive third, okay? But he's not a high presser. So that's 52 percentile, yeah, breaking that down. And as I said, the errors on the ball is, so you want that to be low. So that's 88 percentile. So that's a good thing to have, right? Not a bad thing. Yeah. So that's about 0. Per game. So he doesn't do a lot of errors per 90. Tackles and interceptions high. Yeah. So these are some good metrics to be having as a fullback in a bit more detail. Aerials, just because we always look at that, he's not great. 27% is not a good stat to be able to look at. But we look at Robbo. So in the last year, right? Okay. So again, defensively, that's all red. There's no green there, whereas Costa's had green at the top here. Yeah. In between, we know that he's a better carrier of the ball, 74 percentile, but he's actually not, he's still not a bad passer. He's just not in the 90th percentile pass completion. He's only the 70th. When he's in and around the box, shot creating actions 94. So he still creates a lot of shot creating actions. He's less of a threat, even more so on the ball in terms of himself, though, taking a shot. And if we start breaking that down even more, well, look at shoot here. Passing, I would find it hard pressed to find a Liverpool player who wouldn't have a lot of green here, but we're in the 90th for a lot of these. Okay, pass completion long is worse than Costa's at 40th percentile. Expected assist pass type. Sorry, yeah. So we've got, excuse me, we've got passes attempting long balls, through balls he's better at. Okay, but there's a very similar traits between the two, right? Shot creating actions, though, he's not as high. He's definitely not gaining as many fouls, and he's not gaining as many defensive actions coming near him, which sometimes means the opposition don't see him as a threat, if you know what I mean. So defensively, whereas we saw with Costas, there was a lot of green on this chart, if you just remember that. So defensively here was Costas, yeah. If you look at Robbo, it's a lot of red. Yeah, so tackles, he's dropped down to 16th percentile tackles, 19th percentile. Yeah, tackles in the defensive third, which means he's having to do a 29th percentile, attacking third, low down. Errors, he's in the 42nd percentile for errors per 90. Yeah, so that's creeping up. Yeah, you want that to be where Costas is, right down the bottom. Possession. Again, green, you wouldn't expect this to drop too much because he's a quality footballer. Aerials 1, he's in 18th percentile, 37%, which is slightly better for Costas. So if you overlay the two as if we were buying a player, you'll see here Costas largely covers Robbo's wagon wheel. The only thing that Robbo is still slightly better at is non-penalty XG and non-penalty goals. I think it's largely because Robbo's actually scored, or he's had more XG and progressive carries. But we know that is Robertson's game, carrying the ball. Everything else, Costas is performing above Robbo's metrics. And if you look at the more detailed reports as you go down, particularly on the defensive side, you can see the stark contrast between the two players. Yeah, there is a lot of green here to like. Maybe not so much on the blocks and that for Costas that you would appreciate, but everything else, you've got some 90th percentiles, you've got some 80s and 70s, whereas Robbo, no, there's only one of them above 50 percentile, which is dribbles challenged, which is where he's challenging someone, yeah. But he's in the 42nd percentile for actually 47, sorry, for actually winning that challenge, yeah. So in terms of the two, I think you can see there is now a distinct difference off the ball, definitely, and Costas at the moment offers us some more security in possession on it in terms of his passing in certain areas. And I also think he blends in with Bradley, Bradley's very much a carrier, whereas Costas is a passer. So that balance is slightly better having Costas and Bradley on the pitch. But yeah, I think looking at this a year ago, I don't think there would have been such a stark difference. But breaking it down into more detail, you can really see the granularity of where Costas is now outperforming Robertson on a per 90 basis.
I mean, some of those stats, Bart, that But they're quite stark just when I'm looking at it, even then, and just sort of assimilating all that. Is it fair to say that in summary, and we kind of, if we just park the emotional side of the leadership
Yeah.
or the intangibles a little bit to the side just now, is it a fair summary to say Tsimikas outstrips Robbo defensively, as in it's all green for Costas, 99% or 97th percentile for interceptions, Robbo red across the board? That's a factor to consider. The other factors to consider are, number one is different styles and pro rata, as in Costas is a passer, as you said, Robbo is a carrier.
Yeah.
So you bring that into the mix a little bit as to what you're looking for. But the other thing that really struck me is errors. And we should talk about this for Robbo because, as we said, and I can see, I know the chat panel's going crazy. I get all that. But in terms of errors, you think of the red card against Fulham, the own goal the other weekend, the penalty against Southampton where he shouldn't have let Diblin get all the way and then just waited till he was in the box, the Real Madrid penalty. And even people say, like the own goal, the Real Madrid penalty, unlucky. I can get that. But you've talked about a phrase, the scene of the crime, or not being at the scene of the crime. You know, if you're not good, you're lucky. That's the other option in that regard. Don't be, don't have a bad game and be unlucky. It doesn't really translate to what you want there. So with all that in mind, if you take the intangibles about who's the most popular character, who's a member of the leadership group, who is like, and that's not to be derogatory about Robbo at all. He's been a brilliant servant, but just in terms of the tangibles we put on the table when we're looking at this, and maybe XT comes into it, I don't know, but are all the metrics not suggesting Costas is better to keep?
Yeah, I think Costas is younger. The only one I forgot to bring up there, which I just brought up now, it is the XT. So for the first time in a while, Costas has now overtaken Robbo in terms of XT per 90, right? So you've got Costas is now at 0.19 versus Robbo at 0.18. Now you might think, it's only 0.1. That means he's producing the same XT as Mo, right? And Robbo is on the decline. Robbo used to be really high, like well up there with Trent. Trent's on 0.3, by the way. But so that's the significant moment that Costas has moved ahead. And I have said to you and sat me up, Costas is outperforming Robbo in XT pretty much every time he's on the pitch. His percentage of XT for the team has been growing. Yeah, I think the last three performances he's either been top or second in terms of threat production for the team. And that's a really important thing to remember. That didn't used to be the case. You could say all the other things, right? Yeah, Costas does this, Costas does that, but Robbo would still find a way to contribute to the team. And that just isn't the point now. And I personally, taking away all the intangibles, I think Costas is the better player to keep. But and I actually think there's a market for Robbo as well. I mean, it might sound nuts, but he's an English left back, well respected. You could see him going to a mid Premier League club, whereas I don't think there's a lot of resale for Costas, to be honest with you, unless you sell him on. I don't think you're not going to get big money. So I just think for me it's a pretty easy decision, but it's not me, and they will take into account other things as well. So for me, it would be Costas to keep, but
we'll see the decision we make. And I agree with 99% of that, bar correcting Bart's on the fact that Robbo is Scottish before the rest of Scotland does try and attack me for calling him English that way as well.
Sorry,
it is hard to argue with those stats. And